Hello and welcome to Hot Issues, and this week we are taking a look at many issues related to governance, especially constitutional review. Is our constitution, enough to propel us on the path of deepening democratic practice? One of the difficulties we've had with our constitution since it was promulgated in 1992. What are the things that we need to do in order to make governance relevant to the development efforts of our people and so on? And we are very privileged to have somebody who has practiced it and who has taught it with us in the studio to have this discussion. Welcome to Hot Issues. We have in the studio Professor Mike Oquaye, a professor who taught at the University of Ghana, and he taught political science. He has been in Parliament, he has been a minister, and he's been a High Commissioner. So you're welcome to the studio.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. You have been an advocate of constitutional reform. What exactly is that?
Well, the unexamined life is not worth living. We have a reasonably good constitution. It's worked quite well for some time. But nevertheless, it's not a perfect document. It is possible that we can improve upon it. We must also be studying as we go along to see that which can strengthen the constitution even further. Of course, that is why generally we are all talking about constitutional reform, and I believe it's a system that will go a long way to improve upon things for us. This constitution has strengths, it also has weaknesses. If you look at the hybrid nature of the constitution, you may say it does not really help us. If you look at the level of accountability expected of members of parliament, can we achieve that by the present system that we have to its maximum, or there's something that we can do better for ourselves?
What in the constitution makes our president or make our president so strong?
Let me
powerful?
Let me start with the hybrid constitution. It's an area that concerns me so much, and I've written and I've spoken about it for a very long time. The president has the power. In fact, he's required by the constitution to have the majority of his ministers from parliament. That is a constitutional provision. But in 1979, this was very opposite. Every person who was appointed a minister under the 1979 constitution had to resign from parliament, so that parliament could be free to ensure that accountability prevailed on the part of the executive. It is very much in line with the doctrine of separation of powers that political philosophers had expounded over the years, and it's good for good governance. The British are different people. British people even rule by conventions. Somehow it works for them. The American model is the best for other people, because the Americans, though they were also coming from the British womb, saw that these conventions and practices which the British practice are not the best for other people. They are a different kind of people. Therefore, the American had a written constitution, and by the interpretations of the U.S. Supreme Court, they were able to put a tight lid on executive power and limited it. For example, our constitution is not in our arrangement. Our parliament is not sovereign. Sometimes people think parliament is sovereign. They are wrong. It is only parliaments like the British Parliament which are sovereign, where it is said parliament can make any law except turn a man into a woman and a woman into a man. Under the US system and under our system, the legislative power of parliament is limited to the constitutionality of any law. And like you know, any law that is inconsistent with the 1992 Constitution, even if purported to have been passed by a parliament, is to the extent of the unconstitutionality null and void. So these are very strong arrangements that we must adhere to, and I would want a dichotomy between the legislature and the executive for many good reasons. In the first place, where there's this fusion, the tendency is that you look to the executive for your political promotion. Let's face it, today when you go to parliament and you are not made a minister, it's like you have not really made it, which is unfortunate, because the legislature is so important an institution. If you consider the career of men like Senator Kennedy, they did not want to be made ministers. In fact, you can't make him a minister. He's too high to be made a minister in the legislature. And he has got an office, he's got a big staff, researchers, and he's duly recognized as such. And in fact, when there's a senatorial committee and a minister, secretary of state, whatever it may be called, is called to that senatorial inquiry, I tell you, you'll be having sleepless nights and having a lot of conferences with your lawyers. Why? Because the Senate has got clout and it has got respect. Because it also has autonomy. But now we've made Parliament virtually appendage of the executive. I think yesterday's papers, I was reading, the Speaker was bemoaning the non-attendance of ministers to come and answer questions. And you could see the gentleman was really frustrated by that apparent disregard. What makes that possible? Because Parliament is really tied to the apron strings of the executive, which means therefore that the House, which is the house of responsibility and accountability, cannot really do its work to the maximum. If you consider the arrangement that we have, even the sitting arrangement of Parliament on the majority side is in a way dictated from Flagstaff House or from the castle. This is very serious. Even your sitting arrangement. Why do I say that? Because the moment you are appointed a minister, you move to a front row. It doesn't matter whether this is your first time in Parliament. And if you are removed from office, well, you have to find your way to the back. So do you see what the executive can even do to Parliament in terms of even your sitting arrangement? Can you check a person like that when even where you sit is in a way determined by him? These are very important matters. The Constitution should seriously re-examine this matter, because under this very Constitution, Parliament is given the power to pass a vote of censure against any minister by a 2/3 majority. Then our own Constitution, having provided this for Parliament, goes on to say that, and the President may cause the removal of such a minister if he or she does not resign. In other words, when Parliament has taken the trouble to pass a vote of censure asking for the removal from office of a minister, which takes 2/3 majority, and it's not easy to get. In fact, members of the majority must support this before it can go. When it has even gone through, then the President may remove such a minister if that minister does not resign. May. That means Parliament had totally pulled out. It means therefore that the real power is the President. And if Parliament has investigated and it has found that a person has done wrong, and by 2/3 majority asks for his or her removal from office, the President may or may not. And these in a way go to show where the power really lies. And these go to show that even by our constitutional arrangement, we are not interested in separation of powers, and we are not really working towards a countervailing authority. And that's why I talk about countervailing authority, not power sharing. There must be a countervailing authority, so that when you come before Parliament, you can really, you should really know that you have come to account to the people. You know, the concept of Parliament is such that you can leave your job and go to Parliament. The doctor can leave his job or her job and go to Parliament. The farmer can leave his or her job and go to, we all don't have to go to Parliament. So we are represented. The concept is that they must really take care of our interest. So in the way that we will do if we were all to leave our jobs and go to Parliament. Therefore, Parliament should be really treated with seriousness. And where Parliament is depending upon the executive, even for information, data, computer knowledge and information, and these are not facilities are not provided enough for the executive, then of course when we come to discuss matters, we are only going to depend upon information provided by the executive. So Parliament must be a research institution, a strong institution, so that it can even countervail whatever the executive is bringing before it. Do we have such a Parliament? And it's not the fault of the Parliament, it's the fault of the system that allows even their monetary issues and so on to be at the pleasure of the executive.
So specifically, what constitutional amendment would you like to see which would limit the influence that the president has on Parliament?
No, the fusion must be removed. Parliament,
so that the president may appoint his ministers outside Parliament.
Must appoint all ministers outside Parliament. And if a person who is a member of Parliament is appointed, as in 1979, that person must resign before taking a position as a minister. Furthermore, members of Parliament should have the freedom to introduce private members' bills. If our Parliament sits, the present amendment means that they are waiting for the executive to bring business. And if the executive will not come and answer questions, if they will not introduce legislation and so on, then what will Parliament do? And if the inquisitorial ability is limited also by party lines, in a way you see that we are really fettering our Parliament. And that's a difficulty. In terms of private members' bills, we say that every bill involves financial implications. I'm sure you have heard these things being said before. The British who introduced it, and that's why I don't like following the British, they are too smooth, they are too flexible. They don't have a constitution, yet they have a constitution. You know, in Britain today, private members are introducing bills. It is strong, and we are going on because the British will always find a way. They brought that rule that if the thing has financial implications, they must come from the executive. And then you say that invariably every bill has financial implications. Therefore, the executive has a monopoly. In Britain, they found a way around whereby all members of Parliament can bring private members' bills. So you see, matters concerning the environment, concerning gender, affirmative action law, even in some of the African countries, Mozambique and others who have done so well in these areas, they have been introduced by private members. Environment, forestry, oil, revenue issues, and so on. These are matters of great and primary concern to certain lobbies and individuals. They should be able to bring these bills and not wait for government to introduce them. I'm not talking about any particular government. It doesn't matter which government.
All governments.
Now we are talking, yes, beyond party politics.
Yeah.
All governments.
Yeah.
We should not wait for any particular government to really champion these, so that members of the majority and the minority who believe strongly, in a bill promote it, and they are able to do better. And it also goes to show our people, that's Ghanaians generally, that Parliament is interested in accountability. Parliament is interested in freedom of information. It's not that it is a government-driven agenda. Parliament is interested in oil revenue matters. Parliament wants to ensure that matters of environment are catered for, and that these things don't catch up with us in terms of cholera and other related diseases and so on. And I believe that unless that happens, then it may look as if Parliament does not have an agenda.
Prof, we'll come back to this issue. Welcome back to Hot Issues, and we are in conversation with Professor Mike Oquaye, distinguished politician, academic, and has been very active in Parliament. And we are talking about constitutional reform. Sir, the approval of Article 71, remuneration for Article 71 office holders, doesn't it present a problem?
Well, it has been well.
Parliament approves for the executive, and the executive approves for Parliament. Is there no problem?
Someone has described it as, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. And in order to avoid even semblances of wrongdoing, this is why we have this legal dictum. Justice must not only be done, but it must be manifestly seen to be done. There's something, a lot in it. Justice must be seen to be done. It must be obvious to everybody that it is being done. So certain arrangements, I would say, are not the best. And you know, this is a good example of the absence of strong institutions. President Obama spoke about Africa not needing strong men but strong institutions. It's a very, very important matter. So I will recommend there must be a powerful institution, independent of both executive and legislature, that will deal with these matters in such a manner that everybody will be at rest in the Republic. I think this is what will do for us. Let me take this opportunity to stretch this to the Lands Commission, because it is a good example of this lack of strong institutions. In our own constitution, Article 258 establishes a Lands Commission, and then it gives it the responsibility to manage all public lands on behalf, not on behalf of the people of Ghana, but on behalf of the president. It's there in black and white. They should manage the lands, public lands, on behalf of the president. What are you talking about? And you know that
because the land is vested in the president.
These are the things that we must avoid. Then it must be vested in the state, in Ghana, and that provision by subsection 2 goes on to say that the minister for lands, responsible for lands, with the approval of the president, gives, and I quote, general directions in writing to the Lands Commission in respect of the functions of the commission. And then it goes on to add in black and white in our own constitution, and that the commission shall comply with the directions
of the minister.
I mean, why do you put a thing like that in the constitution? So if it says give that land, public land, to Mr. so and so, then it's given, and it is constitutional. Do you see how we have done ourselves a lot of wrong by giving people such unbridled, needless, unfounded powers by law and by constitution? I will advocate that this should be removed seriatim at the earliest opportunity. These are things that we must do away with. So, and in fact, the lands must belong to the people of Ghana. Public lands. And the Lands Commission should be a strong, capable, independent body that will manage and administer all those lands independent of the executive on behalf of the people of Ghana. Then A man will respect a woman who really respects himself. When you give him instructions, he will tell you, look at your constitution well, Mr. President. And he knows you can't remove him. And he knows he has a duty to manage the lands on behalf of the people of Ghana. These are the important issues, rather, that when we are talking about constitutional reform, we must seriously examine and address in the interest of the best practices. And you know what I'm talking about in terms of the salaries and managing the lands, they all run in tandem. And if we look at them seriously, we will provide solutions for them.
Now, talking about the principle of separation of powers, you have basically three arms of government: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. We've so far spoken about the relations between the legislature and the executive. What about relations with the judiciary?
You've asked a very good question. You know, when we come to look at the judiciary, we realize that we have a judicial council. I've seriously looked at our constitutions, some of the things that are contained in previous ones, which have been inadvertently removed. In composing the judicial council, it had earlier been provided, for example, that the most senior judge of the Supreme Court, the most senior judge of the Court of Appeal, the most senior judge of the High Court, and so on, in the previous constitutional arrangement. Today, it only talks about...
But they should be members of the Judicial Council.
Yes. Today, it only talks about High Court judge, Supreme Court judge, Court of Appeal judge, which gives some people discretion to choose. I don't like discretions. So those ones should be removed, should be taken away and put there the most senior High Court judge, because it takes something to become the most senior, and that has nothing to do with any party A or party B. The most senior man or woman, put him there or her there, and then avoid the discretion to choose. When it also comes to composing the body, the 5 people, for example, that will examine whether there is a prima facie case against a judge, asking for his or her removal, the president should not have any choice by way of any nominees on the matter. It must be left to professionalism. And I'm saying the president, not President A or President B, because there's always the danger that if you allow a president to also nominate some of the people, there is a possibility, since there's only a majority of 3 out of 5 in deciding whether a prima facie case has been made, that a political influence may come to play. These are some of the details that we must watch in our arrangement. If you remember the case of Justice Amwasechi, there was a controversy, and there was a process by which a panel was being arranged. He had good reason to believe that there could be manipulation, and he retired. Today, judges are not as free from such practices as sometimes we may think. And if we are having a constitutional reappraisal, these are some of the areas that we must reappraise. And you know, I like the institutional representation mechanism. For example, like the Council of State thing. If there's an opportunity, I would like to share a few views with regard to that.
Please do share your views.
You know, we have a Council of State. It started from 1969. The concept was to have a mini House of Lords, an advisory body. You know, the Queen has a Privy Council. That's why I am very careful about British examples. The power that the Privy Council exercises over the Prime Minister, I tell you, you don't have an idea unless you are in Britain. very powerful. They are persuasive authority, but they are the establishment. And when they say you will go, whether you are a toucher or not, sooner or later, you will go. We don't have such systems here. But the idea of the Council of State was a kind of advisory body, and even in 1992, the Committee of Experts went beyond a Council of State that was to advise only the president. No, it was to advise the president, the parliament, and other state institutions. In the constitution drafting itself, then we turn it into only an advisory body of the president. That itself is wrong. Then it is provided in black and white in the 1992 constitution that they will only advise on a legislation before parliament or which parliament has passed if the president so requests them. If you have a Council of State of serious minded people, you want to tell me that unless a president seeks their advice or tells them to look into the legislation, no matter the wrong that they may see in it, they should keep their mouth shut until the president asks them to? That itself is unthinkable, especially considering the fact that that was not what our Committee of Experts recommended. So you ask yourself, who wanted to have these things polluted? You know, the president has the power by law under our constitution to choose the majority of the council, members of the Council of State. In Ghana, from the north to the south, east, west, center, there is no chief who chooses members of his council, advisory council. The elders in our system are all sub-chiefs or people who represent various lineages that form the town or the state everywhere in Ghana. So in fact, the chief, before you come, you may say literally, we are. That is a very important thing. And when Nana or Ni comes, the elders will support you. They will be with you. They know it's your right to be chief, otherwise you won't be there. And they respect custom, and they will support you. But when you go beyond a certain extent, and they have advised you indoors at dawn and so on, and he still wants to pursue a pathway that is incongruous with tradition and custom, they will tell you enough is enough. And in Ghana we will say, you know, modern sooner as modern efema. And of course you can't make kenke when the water is more than
you'll be making cocoa.
Then you'll be making cocoa. And when that comes, the elders will stand against you. Why? Because they are independent. They come there as of right. They themselves are sub-chiefs. What I will recommend, and I recommend it passionately, is that we behave as if this country has no owners. All these council of churches, they are part owners. The Muslim Council, they are part owners. The Methodist Conference, look at their following. How can you say they have no say?
The trade unions,
the NUCs, students,
the Carpenters Association,
associations,
the Dressmakers Association.
Exactly. All these people are
the
stakeholders.
GPRTU.
The GPRTU.
Yeah.
They are stakeholders. And it's time we recognized this. So that if we want members of the Council of State, they will nominate and they will send their representatives. Their tenure will be 6 years. The president has 4 years. He will come and go. Before the president comes, they are there. The president will not appoint even one member of the Council of State. He has no business appointing any member of the Council of State. Ghana doesn't belong to any president. Ghana belongs to the people of Ghana. And the people of Ghana can be perceived in certain associational, institutional terms. And when we do this, we really have a country who is seen to belong to the people. And when you come, you respect the people through their institutional representative body, which is the proper Council of State.
Prof, we're coming back to the judiciary again.
Yeah.
There have been suggestions that because the Constitution does not provide for an upper limit in terms of those who sit on the bench, the Supreme Court, there is a problem. Do you agree? As a lawyer, do you agree?
Yeah, in a way, there is a problem. And we definitely have to provide against some of these things. Packing the court can be a very dangerous phenomenon. Once more, I wouldn't want to depend on goodwill of any human being. In fact, that's why laws are there. You know, law is so important. When God made human beings and put them in the garden, the first thing he really gave them was law. When he has provided everything for them, he gave them law. This one, don't eat it. This one, you may eat it. If you eat that one, I'll punish you. What did he do? He tried them. In fact, the first court of law was in the garden. The audi alteram partem rule, that means hear the other party. He heard them. Even the omniscient God, who knows everything, he knew what they had done, but he heard them. And when he heard them, and everybody blaming the other and all those things, then he gave judgment, and it was executed. So law is very, 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 very important in any society. We must take it very, very seriously. So it is and should be with, the system that we are practicing now. So I am up for everything that has got to do with the strengthening of the system, and I trust that if we follow that, particularly on the very line that you are talking about now, it will go a long way to helping us as a people.
What kind of upper limit would you like to see?
It's very difficult to fix numbers. I would rather say the principle.
Yeah.
The principle, there should be an upper limit beyond which you can't go. One thing that sometimes when we make certain comparisons we may be mistaken about is in the United States, and Justice Oquaye, may he rest in peace, made a very interesting analysis in this regard at the conference we had at the IEA. It's not every case that goes to the Supreme Court. But in Ghana, virtually any matter can go to the Supreme Court. You can appeal. The right of appeal, and this was part of the recent matters that were held. To appeal to the Supreme Court means, therefore, that the Supreme Court must be reasonably, staffed so that it can deal with several cases at the same time. Fine. If we want to maintain that system still. But some people say that itself is not necessary. Some cases must end at the Court of Appeal. But assuming that we still have access to the Supreme Court, then we must have enough. Some dealing with criminal cases, criminal appeals at any given time of all types, civil appeals cases of land law type, of the other areas of civil law and so on. Nevertheless, the constitutional cases too must be dealt with by a constitutional court. That is also one aspect. And the French regimes have that kind of system whereby there's a constitutional court. But assuming we are going to have that omnibus Supreme Court, then we may want to have, whether it's 15, 17, 19, 25 or whatever. Nevertheless, we must look at the totality of our system and provide for a cap, so that one cannot simply, whenever it suits a president, pack the court. I am against any possibility of packing. Therefore, we must have a cap. The cap should be carefully fixed, taking into account these factors that I'm talking about. But once it's fixed, by a duly recognized and well considered system, we should have that as a limit.
Now, Prof, before Professor John Evans Atta-Mills passed away, he set up a constitutional review commission. It has done its work and has presented its report. We're going to go on a short break. When we come back, I'd like to find out whether you think the work that Constitutional Review Committee did, it's sufficient to bring about the changes that we all should desire. Well, welcome back to Hot Issues, and we are in conversation with Professor Mike Oquaye. Prof, as you do know, is an academic, is a politician, has been a member of parliament and a minister. And we are talking about the constitutional review processes and their impact on national development. So the commission that Professor Mills set up, are you satisfied with his work?
It was a very serious body. I was there on a few occasions. I appeared before it. As a citizen, I was interested in making recommendations. The secretary to the commission did a fantastic job.
The current executive secretary of the
yes.
president.
He's a very
Tuguba.
Yes. Yeah. Dr. Tuguga, very capable man. And the work was done very thoroughly. And I appreciate him. In fact, I wrote to him.
Nice.
I sent my submissions and I paid my compliments in terms of what they were doing. But I have serious misgivings also with the way the whole thing started, and particularly putting a white paper on it. You see, a constitution does not belong to the government. And the constitution must never be seen as a partisan document. You remember, even under the military regimes, they brought in experts to bring about a constitution. And as much as possible, government did not put a white paper on it, nor come out with it as the result, the constitution. There was some kind of public involvement so that it will have a consensus as emanating from the people. Therefore, whenever a government in future is thinking of the need, but a government can also see the need. Why not? A government is part of the society. I think it will be better if immediately civil society, parliament, and such organizations are brought in a manner that does not make it look as if it's government that is doing it. Because government is an interested party in the constitution. And if the government is seen as to be tinkering or commissioning, for which matter it will be its work, then you are going to create problems for the end result, whether it's party A in authority or party B in power. A white paper also on it gives a totally different impression. A white paper is simply government's position on any matter. That is what essentially white paper is. And the moment that becomes the front running document, then it may have difficulties. Look at the entrenched provisions. In order to let an entrenched provision go through by way of an amendment, you need 2/3 majority of the people to approve of this in a referendum. Whether it's party A or party B, if any party in Ghana today purports to want to champion an amendment that will require this majority, if they were to ask me for my view, if it were my own party, I would tell them, be very careful. Because how do you intend to get a 2/3 majority without involving the other party? I don't think in Ghana today any party, any political party can contend that it will get that kind of majority. So we will see that it must necessarily be a consensus building exercise that will make it get acceptability. Today, if any person also wants to take a thing like that to a referendum, I will say, how do you put the death penalty against other provisions concerning the district assembly, for example? If I don't want this, can I selectively choose? And that is why there might be a certain consensus building as to how the whole process should take place. Because if you say yes or no, you'll be engaging in an exercise in futility. Because
what does the yes apply to? What does the yes no apply to?
What does the no mean?
But isn't it possible to have multiple questions and multiple answers?
Well, these are all issues regarding which, therefore, you must build a consensus. It's not a white paper affair. And this is not to criticize any particular person or government. This is to talk constitutional law and constitutional practice. It's very difficult, if not impossible, with a two-third majority to look at some of these ones as something that we can easily do. Therefore, it must be a consensus building activity. It must also generate more discussion than it's gone in now. The issues must be broader, including some of the things that I've had the privilege under your program's auspices to discuss. And in fact, this can go on to even matters regarding the district assemblies, for example. All these, and in fact, gender matters. Because I think that one of the challenges that we really face today is affirmative action inherent in the Constitution itself. Instead of creating more seats in Parliament only for political parties to compete, we should have created more seats in Parliament for women to compete by affirmative action provisions, so that there will be more women in Parliament. It's been done in some of the African countries that we think we are more democratic than, but who have actually overtaken us.
In Kenya, for example.
Yes, and we are not aware.
Yeah.
We have been overtaken by many of these countries by some of these constitutional affirmative action arrangements. These are the matters that we must be thinking about, rather than thinking about how many seats we can introduce so that our party may have a political advantage. And these things bring us backwards.
Should we be electing district and municipal chief executives briefly?
I believe we've come to the situation where all members of the district assemblies must be elected directly by the people, and not only 2/3 of them. 1/3 of the seats must be reserved for women only, elected directly by the people. Local women elected by the people locally to take certain seats by way of the 1/3. All the DCEs, MCEs, and so on should also be elected by the people, so that they will really, have account to them, and the local decentralization. Incidentally, the political parties, and in fact the others, have all subscribed to this. Only when they get to power, they don't do it. I mean, to be honest with ourselves. But how will they do it? Tighten the screws, make it a constitutional matter, and then they will do it. So you see, the constitutional arrangements are very imperative for a good governance, so that even where the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, the constitution will assist you so as to do the right thing. And I think our constitutional arrangement, we owe it to our people, especially those people who are experts. They must advocate, they must analyze, and they must really make recommendations, so that at the end of the day, even the weakest of all flesh will be supported by the strict provisions of a good constitution.
The presidency has sent to Parliament its amendments to the constitution. Did we follow due process? Are you happy with what we have done so far? I understand that it's even gone to the Council of State and come back to the Speaker. Are you satisfied with all of this?
I'm not.
Why?
Because there's a forward and backwards thing. Nobody seems to be sure of what's happening. Is that not so? Otherwise, you wouldn't have the Council of State making a statement separate from what is coming from Parliament. And in fact, if you look carefully at your constitution, these are matters you may want to discuss later. What is the role of Parliament actually in amending an interest provision? What is the role? Mere conduit? Because it doesn't
mere conduit. Parliament is a mere conduit, yeah.
Mere conduit?
Yeah.
And if it's a mere conduit, what is the House's role? And that is why consensus must be built outside Parliament with regard to some of these matters. Otherwise, we'll be engaging in an exercise in futility. Otherwise, we'll be wasting state funds. Because who will get the two-third majority? From what direction? Under what auspices? But if there's consensus,
maybe there's an assumption that the two leading parties would agree. After all,
how can you assume?
After all, you all agree that the district chief executives should be elected.
Well, how can you agree when you are not really talking on the matters? And that is where there's a gap and a lapse. There must be, and that is why it must not be a government white paper. White paper simply means government view, proposal on a matter. It must go beyond that. The civil society, the owners of the land must be involved. The Christian Council, the Muslim groups, the Christian groups, the traditional authority and all those things. There must be a serious consensus building in regard to some of these things. When that is done, then we will not have a futile exercise. And these are serious challenges that I believe must be looked at in a holistic manner, not from any partisan manner at all. Otherwise, we'll be wasting public funds because we will not get anywhere.
What is the platform we have to use to build this consensus? Is Parliament not a sufficient platform for building this national consensus?
Well, Parliament will not be sufficient. Parliament is going to be an important part of the process, definitely, because it is a representative body. But the Parliament also has been sort of engrossed in unbridled partisanship. And this we all know. If the thing is coming from the other side, then it's not appreciated. Even if a criticism is genuine, it is not appreciated. Otherwise, some of the examples that we all know, this is not a forum for it, will never have happened. If we build the consensus, starting from the Council of State, which Council of State is a really national institution, which recognizes that this country has got owners, similar to our traditional system, the owners of the land. When that begins to develop, I believe that we shall go a long way.
Prof, thank you very much for coming to the studio. Thank you very, very much, Prof.
Joy to have you.
Well, we've all listened to Professor Mike Oquaye, an academic, a politician, and many more. I even understand that he's in the ministry.
You know very well.
Yes, I understand that.
The Baptist ministry.
Yes, Baptist ministry. And I'm quite
service to God, service to man.
I'm quite sure that we've all learnt a few things from this conversation with Professor Mike Oquaye. The best is on TV3. Don't forget that. Keep your dial here until we meet again next week.